Hi everybody, welcome to week 5 of the Pacific Northwest Sew Along. We've got a copy of the book now, which is great. You should have yours from the very beginning, but I got mine a little bit later since we're filming early for this. So this week we're going to be referring, starting on page 25 of our book, and we're going to make the morning sun block. We're going to go over flying geese in this block because we haven't covered that yet in any of the previous weeks that we've done. But we've already covered half square triangles, we've already covered flipped corners, and now today we're going to cover flying geese, and that should pretty much take care of the general directions in the front of your book that show you techniques that and how it's written in the book. So every time you make flying geese, you're going to do it the same way. Every time you make half square triangles, you're going to do it the same way we went over in one of the previous weeks. So we are using background fabric. We're using medium yellow and light yellow for this block. And again, just a quick reminder, use your swatch sheet and label each piece, put a little piece of your fabric down on your swatch sheet. And that way in future months, you only use the medium yellow this month, but of course you know you're going to use the background and you're going to use the light yellow again towards the end when you get to the lodge blocks. So you can see I already have the block cut out and I've got all my pieces labeled. It's very important, especially when we get to next week's block. You're going to really want to label all of your cut pieces. It just makes it go quicker. So it fit on my project board, my small project board, and again I'm using the alphabetties. You can use scratch paper, sticky notes, whatever, but it's important. You're going to want to label your cut pieces. So we're going to turn to 25 in our book. So we're going to grab pieces C and pieces B, and we're going to make 8 flying geese. And I'm going to show you how they're written in the book and how I go ahead and make them. Now there's several methods to make flying geese. This is how I write my flying geese in my books because to me it's the most common method. Everybody pretty much knows how to make flying geese using the flip corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue, and that way I can just sit down and I can chain piece. So I'm just going to put about 3 or 4 drops of glue. And I'm going to go ahead and do this to all 8 flying geese halves. You don't want to do this half yet because you've got to get this sewn, cut, flipped, and ironed before you put this on, or you won't be able to, it'll be caught in your seam. So again, if you are following along and using the diagonal seam tape from Cluck Cluck Sew, you won't need to draw your diagonals on the back of your background squares. But if you're not, go ahead and draw a diagonal on the wrong side of your background squares, and then you're going to actually, for this method, you're going to stitch right on the drawn line. Okay, now I've stitched on the drawn line, if you're drawing your line, or on the point to point. And now I'm going to clip all of these. There's 8 of them. And you can use your rotary cutter and a ruler if you choose. I really like to just use my scissors unless they're great big. Okay, and you saw me glue these down. I love to do that. It just holds them in place. Now I'm going to, of course, use my starch pen. I'm always going to give that a little shot with a hot iron. It sets your stitches if you're using 100% cotton thread. Plus, it kind of makes your fabric a little more pliable when it's warm and you get a better press, I think. Once you get those pressed, you're going to want to do the same thing. Now we've got half of our flying geese made. Now we want to make the other half. So I'm just going to quickly go through here and glue these down. And I find that if I keep my glue bottle half full and keep it on its side, it just works quicker for me. And my little needle tip on my glue bottle doesn't get plugged as often. But if you do get a plugged bottle or a plugged tip, just unscrew the lid and poke a pin in this way, grab out the glob and put your lid back on. That works better than pushing it through. And you can see that I am putting the glue in the part that I'm going to trim off. If you accidentally get it too far over here, it just comes undone super easily. And then you want to again hit it with your dry iron to dry your glue faster. If you don't use a dry iron, your glue will dry slower, and if you don't iron it, then it'll really dry slower. Second, I dropped one. I gotta grab it. Oh, it stuck to me. That was handy. Kind of like my dinner. Now I'm gonna go back over. We're gonna speed this up while I stitch the rest of these, or skip over it probably, and then I'll come back and trim those. All right, I'm finished stitching right on, from point to point, right on my diagonal line. And now I'm gonna trim these again, and we're gonna press these up. And then we'll have, just like that, 8 flying geese. These aren't the last flying geese that we're gonna make in this block, but next time we only have to make 4 for the center of the star. Okay, we're gonna press these out. Again, I'm gonna use my starch pen, hit it with my dry iron, give it a little highlighter, and then be sure to refer to your book, because all of your pressing arrows and pressing directions are in the book on the graphics. That way, when you are done making this block, everything should nest together really nicely. And you don't have to try to figure out which way you want to press. All right, we've got our 8 background and medium yellow flying geese. I'm going to set those aside, and now we're going to grab our E triangle or rectangles and our F squares, and this is going to make the inside of our morning sun block. And we're just gonna, this time we're making 4 flying geese instead of 8, and you're gonna follow the same process. All right, now we have our 4 flying geese for the inside of our block made, and now it's time to put our block together. So you want to grab the rest of your pieces. So now I'm going to lay out my block, the center of my block. Follow along in your book. We're still on page 25. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew it into the block into 3 rows. So I'll sew this to this, this to this, this to this, vice versa. And then once I get 3 rows, I'll sew the 3 rows together. Now you can see that I've sewn my center of my block into rows, and I've pressed, and your pressing directions will tell you which direction, and then they nest. These go out, these go in, these go out. Then your seams will nest right together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew my 3 strips together and make the inside of my block. All right, you can see that now the center of my, let me press this a tiny bit better. The center of my morning sun block is done. Got a little starch on there, but it'll dry up. Now I'm going to add the rest of my flying geese and my corner squares, and we're going to finish this block up. All right, you can see now that our block is all laid out. First thing I'm going to do is sew these 2 units together, and then I'm going to sew this into a row, this into a row, and this into a row, just like we just did. All right, we are finished with our morning sun block on page 25 of the Pacific Northwest book. You ended up making a total of 12 flying geese for this block. So if you are one of those that's reluctant to make flying geese, congratulations, it's done. And now you've got another block done for your year-long sew-along. Thank you so much for joining us for week 5 of our sew-along. We'll be back next week for week 6, and we're going to make the raccoon block. So I want you guys to all be prepared. If you get that cut out ahead of time, be sure you label your blocks for the raccoon, and don't be scared of it. There's a lot of pieces, but we're going to walk through it step by step. Again, if you're interested and you haven't signed up to join us with this sew-along, you can get the kit or the block of the month kit or just the complete kit at RebsFabStash.com. Thanks so much, you guys. Have a great week. See you next week.